Welcome everyone to week 2 of social media analytics and email campaigns. This week we'll be discussing terms and tactics. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We'll be discussing KPIs, metrics, and measures. So what do these three things mean? What's the difference and why it is important to differentiate between them? We're also going to be introducing and reviewing tactics and how they affect and could mean the success in any particular KPI metric or measurement. We're also going to look at campaign URLs and why they're valuable and how we can create custom campaign URLs to use to track measures and metrics and KPIs. And then we're going to look at A/B testing, which is very important in testing different tactics and strategies to increase our results. And then we're going to introduce this week's discussion question. So let's jump into KPIs, metrics, and measures and what's the difference between these three things. So a metric is a standard of measurement, and the measure is the number associated with your metric. So what does that mean in an example? That means that a centimeter would be a metric, but 25 centimeters would be a measure. So it's important to be on the same page about what these different words mean, because they're fairly universal terms in the marketing world. So we want to make sure that we're all confident and comfortable when we enter the marketing world and discussing with our coworkers and in the workplace the difference between a metric and a measure. So an example in marketing speak would be our success metric is the click-through rate, which was measured at 70%. So the metric is the click-through rate and the measure is the actual result. So we just want to make sure that you know the difference between the category you are measuring and the goals you're trying to reach. So the category is the metric of click-through rate, and the goal, let's say, was 70% in this category, and you had measured at 70%. So you had met your goal in that metric based on the measurements. A KPI is a key performance indicator. So all KPIs are metrics, but not all metrics are KPIs. The KPIs are the metrics that are most closely aligned with your business objectives. So that means that you're looking at the overarching business objectives, be it sales or awareness, etc., and then assigning metrics that are key performance indicators of meeting that goal. Often, KPIs are set by your manager or your manager's boss or someone who has their focus on the business objectives of the company overall. There's a good chance that someone is setting these KPIs for you when you're working in a bigger organization or on a larger marketing team. But if you're a small business and you're working for yourself, or you're working on a small team where you're maybe the only representative when it comes to social media marketing or digital marketing, then you have to set the KPIs. So that's why it's really important to understand the business and the organization's objective and then align with those objectives the metrics that matter most to meet your goal. So let's start using some examples to better understand these different terms. So we're going to use Aldo shoes as an example that's universally well known here in Canada as a discussion point. So if you're in a digital marketing capacity, you need to be able to collect measurements for your metrics that can help you identify whether or not your content, campaigns, and tactics are helping you achieve these goals. So let's use Aldo as an example, like I said. The goals in this case would be to boost Q2 sales by 10%, the conversion rate increase by 2%, and grow site traffic by 20%. So what metrics would we be looking at in general, but then also specifically to meeting their goals? So here we have a list of metrics that we're looking at overall. They're not necessarily KPIs, or we haven't determined yet which ones are KPIs, but they are examples of metrics that would be used in determining if we are on track to meet the goals that are mentioned here. So the first one is sales. So you specifically might not be directly involved in driving sales, but you do need to be able to report on this metric if it is important to the business or the organization. Website visits, for example, a very important metric in relation to social media specifically, and of course to email campaigns. Where are the sales coming from? Where are the people coming from? Do they stay on the page? Which pages do they stay on? Where do they spend the most of their time? All of these kind of measurements, are very important in understanding the path of your customer and the potential of that customer to convert into actually buying something. So that's why it's really important to determine, who is a new visitor, how long is that new visitor staying? Is it a returning visitor? Are they staying longer and looking at more than one product? What was the source for both of those types of visitors? What was the bounce rate when people were getting to the website? And then how much time did each individual person spend on the site overall? Now, these website visits then become even more important when you're looking at conversion rates and you're able to track, their initial point of engagement, be it from your email campaign or your social media content, and if they made it all the way to the point of conversion. So the conversion rates need to be tracked based on new visitors, returning visitors, and customers. The shopping cart abandon rate, conversions by source. So like I mentioned, if they're coming from social, AdWords, emails, etc. Why all this is important is because you want to be able to compare the path of each individual unique purchaser and really understand what it was about their individual processes that got them to the point of conversion, and then compare and create the strongest campaigns you can, and work with website developers to develop the most seamless website you can, so you're almost always getting people, whether they're new or returning visitors or returning customers, to the point of conversion at the end of the process. Audience metrics are also very important, particularly from a social media standpoint, because you really want to understand if there's a growth in social following and mentions and click-through rates from owned properties, because this all speaks to the opportunity for conversion with these new audience and growing audiences. And you always want to be able to look at that growing audience and think, how are we going to convert more of this following or these more engaged users into a customer who does complete the conversion, meaning they buy something or sign up for something. Like I said at the beginning of this slide, we didn't assign KPIs to any of these just yet. These are just a list of metrics that you could be looking at when you're reporting on your campaigns and your tactics. It's really important to be collecting data and the measurements of these different metrics across the board, whether they are KPIs or not, because all of it is valuable data to you when you're looking at your tactics and speaking to their success or learning if there was more opportunity to success. Your KPIs are very important. Let's go back a slide here. Your KPIs are really important when you're communicating to higher ups on your team or to higher ups in management and saying, yeah, we did meet those goals and these did lead to those conversions, those sales, those signups. That's what those KPIs are really important for. But the tactics and the metrics of the tactics are very important for you as potential campaign builders and strategists and content developers to understand where there's room for improvement and growth and more success. So let's take a look at some KPI examples. So this is where we're looking at what the goal is and then what is the KPI that we're assigning from a digital perspective. So let's look at these e-commerce sales goals, still looking at Aldo as our example. So they need to boost Q4 sales by 10%. The assigned KPI is conversion rate and site traffic. That's because there's a close correlation between the more people that we can get to the website, and if it's a strong website that pushes people through to conversion, and we associate or we tie together the site traffic results and the conversion rate, there should be a boost in sales in that quarter. So if the conversion rate is strong and we've increased the site traffic, then that means more people are coming and more people are making it to the point of sale. Now, looking specifically at the conversion rate, so what's interesting here is that the conversion rate is a goal to increase it by 2%, but it is also one of our KPIs. So there is the opportunity for these metrics to act as both. And here's a really great example of that. So our conversion rate increased by 2%. What KPIs are we assigning to that? Well, of course, we're going to assign conversion rate itself because we're looking to increase the conversion rate, but also we're going to look at things like shopping cart abandonment rate and click-through rate, because if we're seeing an increase in shopping cart abandonment, then that means we're potentially losing customers that could be converting. But if we see a decrease in shopping cart abandonment rate and then an increase in conversion rate, that means that we have successfully converted more people coming to the website and have diminished the number of people that are abandoning their cart after they fill it. Another key metric or KPI, I should say, for conversion rate is click-through rate, because we want to be keeping an eye on how many people we're getting to the website and then what's happening to them after. The gross site traffic by 20% was a goal also. So now the assigned KPIs are site traffic for the obvious reasons. We're trying to literally get more people to the site. But then we're also going to look at the traffic sources. Have we seen strength with specific sources over others? Do we have opportunity to introduce more traffic sources? The click-through rates, of course, are once again very important. How many clicks are we getting per reach of 1,000 people? All very important to understand. If 1,000 people are seeing our content, or let's say at minimum 10% are clicking through to the website, and why are they doing that? The social mentions are also incredibly important, because social mentions do have the opportunity to drive traffic to a website, not just to other social pages. So looking at those social mentions, getting down to a granular level, you can be looking at which mentions were more successful in driving traffic than others. Was there a surge in people sharing particular items from the site? If you're working with bloggers or influencers, that's another potential for tracking those social mentions. And when we get into the custom URLs, you can really understand and see the path from these social mentions and how they got to the website. And of course, we're also going to look at the bounce rate, because great that we grew the site traffic, but if the bounce rate also increased, we have a problem, because we've pushed people to a website that they're immediately bouncing off of. So what's interesting about these KPIs is that you can be associating KPIs not just at an overarching level of, there has to be, let's say this increase, like the conversion rate increase is an example of like that was a KPI, but a lot of these can be associated to tactics, which means that an individual tactic could have more KPIs than your sales and marketing team's overarching KPIs for the campaign. That's actually incredibly important for you. So you're setting a baseline to make sure that you're understanding at a very granular level what is working and what isn't. And that's really going to help you confirm to you and then be able to speak confidently to others why what you're doing is working versus any other tactic. So like I said, can be these overarching high level KPIs. So conversion rate, gross site traffic, all these goals that also simultaneously are key performance indicators, let's say on a sales level or on a marketing level, but they can also be associated to additional KPIs that speak to your results and your success. So KPIs definitely can change based on function, quarterly goals, and campaigns. They're really not set in stone. And, different departments will definitely have different KPIs. So if you're working in one individual company that has internal marketing and sales and public relations and these different categories, you will all have different KPIs depending on the function of the different tasks within those departments, the quarterly goals that you're all setting, but then also the individual campaigns. The importance of KPIs won't change even if the KPIs are changing. You'll always need to report to a key performance indicator to prove your value and to prove the success of the work you're doing. And KPIs, they really do help you evaluate your strategy and your tactics so you know how you're performing. So just like I said on that last slide, you have to look down at the granular level of the KPIs of your individual tactics so that you can speak confidently and know where you can be making changes on your campaigns and your tactics. But then also, it's really important for you to speak to those KPIs on a higher level to your management and the people you're reporting to so that you can prove your value. A really quick example on an account I'm currently working on, we all need to report into the same document for KPIs, and everyone's KPIs look very different. So I'm reporting specifically on social organic and social content and social community size. And I have my different KPIs that are those three that I need to report to that were set from at an executive level. Then we also have paid social, where we're reporting to paid metrics like impressions and engagement on paid content. Then we're also working with a PR team that needs to report to blogger engagements and the number of blogger mentions and the engagement on those mentions. So that's an example of each of these departments had set KPIs from an executive level that all are completely different from each other, but all work cohesively together from an overarching marketing perspective. So looking at tactics and speaking to tactics, these are what will drive the success in your campaign so you're meeting those KPIs and drive the success so those measures are coming through at the set goals. So tactics are strategic activities to help you reach your business goals. So an example of a tactic is launching a live streaming series on Facebook in order to reach a certain goal, be it driving traffic to a website or driving awareness of a particular product. Being on Facebook is not the tactic. The platform or the channel is not the tactic. It is where the tactic happens. So it's really important when you're communicating in your teams or to your clients that you're explaining that just being on Facebook is not strategic or tactic. It's just the channel or the platform where your tactic and your strategy will be launching off of. So tactics require measurement, and the tactics will always vary from organization to organization, from campaign to campaign. That's why it's really important that when you're setting up your tactic and your strategies and your plans, that you're immediately assigning what your metrics are going to be for that individual tactic, those individual tactics, and your KPIs overarching and for the tactics. So for example, like one campaign may have a live video push and another could be a paid campaign with clicks as the goal. You need to measure all of the most important data for the individual tactics so you have the data to explain why did this work better than the other. And then what you do is if you collect all of this data and report to all of this data, then you go and extrapolate those KPIs that you highlight. Those are the big show. Everything else, though, are just the ongoing data that you need to know to make sure that your tactics and your strategies are working. This is one thing that's very consistent. Needing to measure your activities will never change. Like we mentioned a few times in this lecture today, you will always need to report on the work you're doing to provide the value, or to prove the value, You will most likely at every single point with every single client at some point need to prove why you're the one that's doing the work for them, whether you're on a team, in an organization, or if you have your own a little crew of clients. In my case, I always report out every single month to every single client, because this way there's always that record that this tactic is what we decided on. This is why I suggested it. This was the strategy. This was the KPI. We met the KPI, and this is how and why. And that's really important for me to know in constantly improving the work for the client, but it's important for the client to know that you're not wasting any time and you're really putting together the best possible work for them, and you are helping them achieve their overarching goals. So let's go back to our example of Aldo. Clearly, shoes are a very fascinating topic to me, so that's why we're going to keep using them as an example today. So let's say Aldo is launching an Instagram influencer campaign to boost online sales. So they've identified 20 influencers online who fit their brand image. They've given influencers one pair of shoes for them as like a thank you for being a part of the campaign, plus a code to give away to one of their followers, so they can host a contest and the follower will get this special code to get their own free pair of shoes, and they'll get a special link for their Instagram bios and their stories. The goal is to increase the Instagram conversions by 5% during the campaign. Now, the special link part of this equation is incredibly important in tracking the measures of this metric. So, we're trying to see how many clicks the individual influencers brought in through their Instagram stories and their bios. The only way that we can really truly measure each individual influencer against another is with custom URLs. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but just to remember that when you're tracking these metrics, you're trying to make sure that the data is as pure as possible, so that when you're reporting on it, you can be as clear as possible as to who did what in each individual campaign. So the KPIs for this campaign would be conversions from Instagram, clicks on, let me step back a second. So conversions on Instagram. So how many people start on Instagram and then go to the Aldo website and then actually buy something. So we're tracking the entire customer process from Instagram to the Aldo website, where they went, what they selected, and then when they finally actually made it to buy something. We're also tracking, the clicks on the Instagram bio links and the swipe ups and the stories. So we're tracking two different things here. We're going to be tracking the total clicks across the entirety of the campaign. So we can say, 200,000 link clicks across all content on Instagram for this campaign. But we're also going to be tracking by the individual influencers. So influencer 1 brought in 5,000 clicks and influencer 2 brought in 10,000 clicks, and so on. Now, that's really important because when we're selecting to work with influencers, we want to prove the value for working with them, and often these influencers need to be paid. So proving the value of paying the influencers, and also proving that they in fact are influencers with their following. So it's really important to track by influencer, because you'll always need to speak to the value of working with an influencer. Also, we're going to be looking at traffic from Instagram in general, because that could equal a lift in conversions from Instagram. And then if it isn't equaling a lift in conversions from Instagram, then it's a really telling data point from a strategic perspective and a tactic perspective to understand why, even though we had a massive lift in traffic, why wasn't the conversion rate, why didn't the conversion rate see a lift? And that could speak to potentially maybe that roster of influencers. Maybe their following is not that interested in Aldo shoes as a potential shopping opportunity. Maybe you needed to go with a completely different set of influencers, or maybe some of the influencers were not as successful as others. So that's why these overall data points are very important. And then you also have the granular down to the individual influencer, so you can piece together, this is why this didn't work and this is why this did work. So now we're going to use Facebook as a tactic example just to bring this all into a different light. So Aldo is also launching a live stream series on Facebook. So every Wednesday for the month of April, they're going to go live with their in-house stylist to show behind the scenes of their new summer line. During the live feed, there will be a coinciding Wednesday sale. So the sale code will only be announced in the live videos and will only work for specifically the summer line that they're trying to sell. The goal is to sell 50% of the summer line before the end of April. So that is the tactic example. So once again, the specific tactic is this live stream series where we've attached the metrics as click-through to the website, and the use of the sale code, so the conversion rate, is also a metric we're measuring through the platform Facebook. So what are the KPIs for this campaign? Traffic from the Facebook live video links, the total summer sales using the code, the traffic from Facebook in general, and the percent of the product sold by April 30th. So traffic from the Facebook live video links. How successful are these live streaming videos every Wednesday really are at How successful are these Facebook live video links in driving traffic to the website? Are they actually encouraging people to leave Facebook, click this link, and go to the Aldo website? How many sales have been made using these codes? So that's where the total summer sales using the code is very important. That also helps us determine the conversion of people coming from this video. And that's, once again, a very key measurement in telling us how successful this tactic was at driving conversions. Traffic from Facebook in general helps us then compare the traffic coming from specifically this video in converting and in that conversion rate compared to the traffic coming from Facebook in general. So how much of our overall traffic is coming from particularly this video, or just a combination of all of our other Facebook tactics? Because keep in mind, you could be running multiple tactics at once. It's quite common. So this summer campaign with the live stream videos could be one tactic, while also there could be banner ads running and Facebook ads running on something else. And so you need to look at the overall traffic during that time and then saying, okay, this campaign with the Facebook live streaming brought in 20% of the traffic during that time. And that's a pretty good chunk of traffic from a series of tactics from content to paid ads, etc. And a very important metric, especially from a sales perspective, is percentage of the product sold by April 30th. So did you reach this goal? And then you can use the other KPIs and the other measurements to determine why or why not. So if there was this great lift in traffic, was there a simultaneous lift or high usage of that summer sales code speaking to the conversion? And then that meant that, the entirety of the product was sold by April 30th. On the flip side, did we see a lift in traffic, but then not a lot of people had used the sales code or even made it to the point of conversion, meaning that we didn't sell the large percentage of the product by April 30th. So that's why taking in all of these different metrics and all these different measurements, once again, is very important, because you may need to explain why something worked or why something didn't work. And the more numbers that you have in your toolkit to explain that, the better. And then another tactic example. So we're of course going to get more into email later in the semester, but I just wanted to use a bit of an email example now when looking at different tactics and measurements and metrics. So let's say Aldo is launching a sale targeted to email subscribers. So summer styles to swoon over, if we're going to get, a little bit copywriter about this. So email subscribers will get 25% off all shoes for the months of March and April using a special code. Existing email subscribers can get an additional 5% off when they get 5 friends to subscribe to the email list. So that means that these potential shoppers could be getting 30% off the shoes that they buy between March and April. So the goal is to increase newsletter subscriptions by 10% in March and April, but also increase online sales by 15% over last April. So this is a build and sell kind of combination goal. So it's bringing two different goals together through one tactic. So what are the KPIs for this email campaign? Of course, we're going to be tracking the number of new subscribers because we're asking the current subscribers to refer the newsletter to their friends and encourage them to also subscribe. We also want to see a lift in the March and April sales because we are pushing people to the website to use the discount of 25% plus the potential additional 5%. And then also, we want to see a percentage increase in March and April sales over the previous year. And that's because we're introducing this tactic and we're providing an extra level of discount. So of course, the end all be all goal of a tactic and campaign like this, is to see a percentage increase in those sales. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of doing a campaign like this? So I want to get you guys thinking about some some metrics that you would be associating to these individual KPIs in this campaign. So now I want us all to get into the exercise of when we're thinking about a campaign and we're thinking about goals and the KPIs, what are the metrics that we know that we're going to have to be measuring for each and every single time? So for the example of the March and April sales, some other metrics you want to be keeping an eye on are, the click-through rate in the emails. You want to keep an eye on the conversion rate, and you want to be able to speak to both of those numbers to prove the success of the email that you and your team has produced. And you also want to be able to speak to that percentage increase in March and April sales by pointing to the conversion rate increase and to pointing to the click-through rate increase. So as you all know, we're going to be talking about emails later in the semester, and I'm really excited to dive in and discuss email campaign content because it really is a really fun area of content development and strategy and planning. So I wanted to show this quick example of some comedic relief in the middle of this very dense lecture with some emails that always get me every single time. And I wanted to point to Aritzia, who lately they've done an incredible job of writing captivating subject lines. So say hello to 238 new arrivals. Say hello to 397 new arrivals. I guarantee that the majority of their subscribers are clicking on those emails each and every single time if they are seeing them. So it's just a fun little LOL to emails that definitely have encouraged me to convert to becoming a paying customer and not just an observer multiple times. So we covered all these different metrics and measures. We looked at click-through rates and conversion rates. We talked about time on site, a series of metrics, but did you feel like that there was any missing? So for example, Facebook page likes, Twitter followers, Instagram followers, Pinterest followers. So why didn't we mention any of these metrics in this discussion? That's because these are vanity metrics. Now, I just want to start this off with a grain of salt here. It's not that I'm technically saying completely no more with vanity metrics. What's important to remember is what happens is that vanity metrics are often measured in a vacuum. What'll end up happening is that these metrics sound great. So, we saw a reach of 25,000 on this Facebook post, and I only have 1,000 fans of the page. That's practically like going viral on a small scale. And it just looks great. This number was big, it was fantastic, but they don't give any real measure of success when standing alone. So I just want to make sure that nobody gets stuck into reporting on the vanity metrics trap. You have to always be remembering why you're reporting on any particular number. So if you've done a ton of research and determined that we're going to do a very fake scenario here, that for every 100 Facebook fans you gain, 1% of those will convert into a paying customer. Very fake stat I just made up here, but let's say that's what the research had concluded. Then you can say and point to we gained 300 Facebook fans in 6 months, and if 1% convert, then that means we will see X number in sales, and so on and so forth. And so it's important to understand that if you've done research and you can say that that metric speaks to a KPI and, let's say conversion of the example, then you can go ahead and report on that metric. But don't be reporting on a metric just because it sounds good. Just because it sounds good to have 5,000 followers, and just because it sounds good to say you got 40 engagements on a post. Did that post provide some sort of educational side that would educate your following into wanting to, or encouraging them to purchase your product? Did you see, maybe you got 60 comments, and were they all with glowing reviews of the product? That's an example where 60 comments is a metric of value if you were asking for reviews of the product. So those are the types of examples that I want you to keep in mind when you're reporting in the future. Always remember that you have to explain the why of why you're reporting on that specific metric. So I mentioned a few times in the lecture so far campaign URLs and how they can provide a lot of value when you're tracking individual pieces of content and the value of those contents in getting people from the piece to the website. So what's really important is that you have a knowledge of how to create custom UTM parameters in Google Analytics so that you can then report on them confidently to your clients and your team members. So we're just going to do a quick rundown of the different types of UTM parameters. We're definitely going to get more into Google Analytics because we do have lectures on the dashboards and analytics specifically. This is just a really brief intro, just so you can understand from a tactic and measurement perspective what is possible with these custom UTM parameters. So the first of the 5 is source. So this will help you identify the advertiser, site, or publication that is sending traffic to your property. So an example would be, an influencer's blog post, a Facebook post, your newsletter. These would all be identified as different sources, or you can set them to be identified as different sources, I should say. The next is the medium. So the medium is where you would define the literal piece that is driving them there. So maybe it's a banner ad, it's a specific newsletter of your newsletters, or it's a specific social post. So this is where you're defining the medium so that it's very easy for you to look at the results and know which of the pieces was the one that, or the type of piece, that brought this traffic. Which campaign is pushing, and so the third one, is campaigns. So which campaign is pushing the traffic? So this is where you can define it was, the summer campaign newsletter. So you can very easily see the results from that specific campaign. So in this case, the campaign would be the summer newsletter, the medium would be the newsletter, and the source would be whatever you set it as in terms of from your specific newsletter, or maybe it's an influencer's newsletter. So these are all items that you can source to differentiate the traffic when you're looking at it in Google Analytics. Term is what you can use it to identify paid search keywords. So this would be used if you're manually tagging your paid terms for Google search. This is very important when you're working with Google search and you're working with a lot of different keywords, as you should be. So this is really helpful for you from the reporting side and the back-end side to take a really deep look and understand what groups of keywords are really working for you. The last one is content. So you can set different values for different calls to action if you're working with more than one call to action in one place. So an example is, let's say you have a blog post that's pushing people in 2 different directions. You can track the source as the same, of course, and the medium as the same, of course, and maybe they're still part of the same campaign, but there's 2 different destinations and purposes. And so that's where you can set down to this granular level in the content UTM. So I'm just going to show you guys next this really great website that Google Analytics provides. Just going to swipe over here, make sure everything's recording. Perfect. So here you have your campaign URL builder. So this is where you're actually building those custom UTMs step by step, so that you can have all your custom URLs that you've set for yourself. So let's use all those shoes as an example, but I made a fake website. So you type in your website here, all those shoes, just kidding.com, and then your campaign source. So let's go back. We'll discuss, or we'll use the campaign source as, we'll name it Summer Campaign 1. And this could be specifically speaking to a newsletter email campaign as the source. Then you have your campaign medium, which we have defined as email. And then the campaign name could be Summer 11, so you know which of the specific summer campaign tactic emails that you're working on. So maybe the first one was titled Summer 11, and the next one is like, feeling the heat. And so these are all steps to name for yourself, so that when you're looking at the report after the fact, it's very clear where everything came from. So just keep that in mind. Like, you would be setting each of these individual indicators to understand where the traffic was coming from. In this case, we're not working with paid search, so we wouldn't put anything here. And if we needed to continue to differentiate the links, then we can add another layer here for campaign content. Then you're provided with this link at the bottom here that you can use in your email campaign, or convert to a shorter link for the email campaign, so that when it's in this newsletter, gets sent out to the following and the subscribers, when the clicks come through and you go to look at your analytics dashboard and you're coming to your acquisition and your all campaigns, which I'll go through a little bit slower in a moment, you'd have this campaign name right here. So that campaign name would be our Summer Campaign 1. And you could then track the results for the users, new users, sessions, bounce rates. And then you can go ahead and look down by source and by medium to understand, once again, where that traffic is coming from. So that's why these custom URLs are so important. So there's going to be a link to this page, so you can all experiment with creating custom campaign URLs in the additional resources for today's lecture, which are all in the week 2 folder. Now, you're all going to have access to the Google Analytics demo account. So they make this available to everyone, for us to all dip our toes in Google Analytics. And it's really easy to access. You click this link here. If you already have a Google Analytics account, you might be familiar with this. Now, don't fret if you don't have a Google Analytics set up yet, and if you don't have a website to use for the setup. You can use your Twitter ID, the URL for your Twitter ID, to set up an account for now, just so you can see the different tabs and get an understanding of where all the numbers are. So when you click this link, it's going to bring you to this page here. So access the demo account. Then you click access demo account, and it's going to open up your Google Analytics. So we'll do as an example right now. Apologies for the slow Wi-Fi all of a sudden. So this is the first thing you'll see when you get to the demo account. Now, once again, we're going to spend more time on this dashboard, but just kind of like peruse around a little bit so you can get a little comfortable. Now, to see where these campaign results will be housed, follow over here to your left tab where you see audience, scroll down to acquisition, and then you're going to click campaigns, and then let's say all campaigns just for what we're doing now. And this is where you'd see if we had a full Google Analytics account, you could be reporting out on the individual campaign. So another piece of the puzzle I'm going to show you now is we also have an Excel document that will be included once again in the week 2 additional resources, where if you're going to be making a bunch of URLs simultaneously, maybe a campaign that has social involved and influencers involved and email campaigns involved, and you want to just make them all in one place, there's this great Google Sheets that can build the custom URLs for you. So the version in the additional resources, you have to make a copy of it. So here's the copy version that I've been playing with. So, I wrote let's say like Facebook advert. The source is Facebook. The campaign name is Summer Styles 2018. Copy this fake URL, put it in here, and then now you have a URL that you could use. You copy and paste into whatever piece you're working on. So this is really great if you're getting organized on a particular campaign, or you want to practice coming up with different source and campaign names to experiment for what works best for you organizationally. So once again, this is all going to be available in the week 2 additional resources that is within the week 2 folder. So let's get back to our presentation and discuss A/B testing. A/B testing is a really important part of the process in determining which of your strategies and tactics and all the different options that are available from a content perspective and formatting perspective and creative perspective can really be the drivers of success in your campaigns. So for those that are not too familiar, A/B testing is when you're comparing two versions of, let's say, like a product or a tool or a piece of content or creative, a website, landing page, so many options. And you're comparing the success of the two different versions. So, here's an example that this was a website that required or that was encouraging signups, and two different designs where the sign up form was lower on the page versus higher on the page, determine which of the signups or which of the pages, encouraged more signups. So when you're working with A/B testing and you're aiming for success, of course, with A/B testing, it's important to test one variable at a time. The reason is that you want to be able to speak to why one version was more successful than the other and why one decision was proved to be more successful than another. If you start changing too many variables, it's hard to really pinpoint which of the decisions really was the driving factor. So if you have the sign up format at the beginning of the page versus the end of the page, those are the only two, or that was the only indicator of more signups versus less signups. That's why you want to just move one thing at a time as an example. Or maybe you have the exact same for creative on a social ad, but the copy is different and everything else is the same, because you wanted to be able to say this copy was more successful with the creative and was more encouraging for click-throughs than this other copy. So that's why stick to using or testing one variable at a time so you can always pinpoint which was more successful. Also, you want to make sure you're comparing the same metrics. So in the example that we had on the last slide, we were talking about signups. It was always about signups. We weren't talking about the time on the page. We weren't talking about if they clicked anything else or engaged with anything else. The metric was signups. So you're only comparing the one metric. That's because you're trying to speak to the result of one metric at a time. Any other variable change or any other focus change could mean a different result in a different metric. Statistical significance is speaking to if the increase in any metric that you're measuring actually did result in some statistical significance in that success. So we're going to get a little more into that in just a bit. The other piece is you want to test often. Testing often is really important, particularly with social, as the platforms continue to change and to make things a little bit more challenging for marketers. So something that tested well 3 months ago in your A/B testing could be completely different today. So you want to make sure you're always continuing your testing to make sure you're producing the best possible content, campaign, ads, whatever it is, as in that current moment. So let's look at some examples for A/B testing. So looking here, we have a very simple example of the download now being in green versus blue. So you have version A and then version B. So which ended up being more successful in encouraging people to download. Looking at the next slide, one version had 1,012 visits and there was 97 downloads. The other version had 1,499 visits and 123 downloads. So it's important to remember again that we're trying to bring a variety of demographics to make it as even as possible when people are engaging with these pages. And we're trying to bring as many people as possible in your A/B testing so you can really get a good amount of data to help drive your strategic decisions. So based on this information, which version would you go with? So you're thinking, okay, well, version B bought us 123 downloads. Okay, well, that brought us more downloads, so shouldn't we be going with that one? Well, not so fast. This is where we get into that statistical significance. So I'm going to bring us to on our additional resources page, we're going to have this link here. So A/B significance test tool. So I have it open already over here. What this really handy tool does is it actually helps determine the statistical difference between those numbers. So what's great about this calculator is that you can be confident that the changes you made will actually improve conversions. So if you actually just look at the conversion rate of those two numbers, so here's the first one. It was the 1,012 visits with 97 downloads, and the 1,499 visits and the 123 downloads. We had one with a conversion rate of 9.58 and one with a conversion rate of 8.21. Now, here's the thing. This tool has determined that they're only 88% certain that those changes in variation A will actually improve your conversion rate. That is not statistically significant enough to make this tool, for example, and you as a result confident that any of those slight changes you made in that download page would mean that you would have more conversions. Now, let's play around with the numbers here. If we type in 130, let's say, it now brings us to 12.85 as a conversion rate, and the conversion rate was 57% better than variation B, which means that it's 100% certain that the changes in variation A will improve your conversion rate, meaning your A/B test is statistically significant. So without this number, it could be hard to determine if the work you just did in creating the A/B testing really did provide the measurements and the knowledge for you to know which option to go with. So when you're doing A/B testing, you may have to do a couple rounds until you can get this type of different conversion rate to really understand if you should be going with version A versus version B. So this is a really great tool that we link to here in the week 2 additional resources. So of course you can come back to this and experiment with it yourself. There's also this really great post, A Beginner's Guide to A/B Testing and Introduction here with Kissmetrics, and also another really great link, the difference between metrics and KPIs that I want you guys to take a look at. This is additional resources. It's really great to read as much as you can on these topics to make yourself feel more comfortable with the information so you can speak to it more confidently. So just coming back to success with A/B testing, just wanted to review really quickly again. So once again, we're testing one variable at a time so we are for sure on which of the variable was actually the piece that brought us the success in our testing, because it also could drive a lot of the strategic thinking in future content and future planning. Compare the same metrics every time. So once again, you are trying to find success with one piece at a time to really speak to the strength of the A/B testing. And this also will impact your strategic thinking in future because you can associate success with certain metrics with certain decisions in your A/B testing. We did that rundown with statistical significance with a really great tool that I encourage you to use and experiment with yourself. And also don't forget to test often because the platforms change, these people sensibility, customer sensibility, all these things change so frequently that you want to make sure every time you're running a new campaign that you're allowing your previous knowledge to somewhat guide you strategically, but always make sure you're still testing to really prove that you are pushing your campaign in the right direction. So for this week's discussion, how are you currently measuring your marketing efforts? Do you already have a set of KPIs? Are you A/B testing? Have you used custom URLs for campaign tracking? Now, if you're currently a student and you do not have any experience yet with social media and digital marketing, this is a really great opportunity to ask each other questions, really get into conversations together. Now, this time, instead of having individual threads, I'm going to start one thread in the discussion board with this question and a little bit more instruction again on encouraging everybody to ask each other questions if they do not have that much experience just yet with social media marketing and digital marketing and experimenting with tracking KPIs and testing and so on. Now, if you've previously worked in social media and you're coming back as a refresher, I do encourage you to reference previous experience. That's great. Or if you've ever worked in any other marketing capacity, that would also be great for the discussion. So please feel free to leverage that experience also. I hope everyone enjoyed this week's lecture. It was a little bit of a doozy.